What's up, fam? Welcome to another edition of God Dreamers, where it is our desire to inspire you to find and activate your God-given purpose through sharing stories, testimonies, and having discussions on today's trending topics. So, hi, I'm your host, Todd.
And I'm Jairus.
All right, Jairus. Well, welcome back.
Yeah, I'm excited to get another episode in the books.
Yeah, man.
How's everything going?
Everything is good. Just got back from a nice little vacation with the wifey. So, been a good trip. So, yeah, back to hitting it hard. So, yeah, I'm especially excited about today's topic because we're going to be talking about raising kids in a Christian fashion in the crazy world in which we live today. And hopefully we'll be able to share some tips. Not saying that we're experts, because we're not.
For
We
sure.
don't have any. Our experiences is through God guiding us and making mistakes. So yeah. But we wanted to kind of take today out just to kind of share a little bit more about some of the things that we've learned, and also the things that we're going to share that we're learning as we share these, about how to best raise our kids in this fast-paced time in which we live in today. So anyway, without further ado, Jairus, you want to kind of kick it off?
Yeah, definitely. I think this is gonna be a great episode. You kind of spoke on it a little bit, and I think I'm gonna treat this more as a Q&A because I'm in the process of raising kids myself, and I know you've done it before. Obviously, I'm here. So I'm excited to just pick your brain and see how I can help raise my kids better. I learn some valuable lessons that you maybe have learned through that time raising us. So I'm excited just to go deep into it, and hopefully you guys listening can take some notes and maybe apply some things that you hear and apply it to your everyday lives. And maybe you can give us some tips in the comments below on how you raising your kids. But to first start things off, I guess we can call this raising faith in the fast world. So my first question is like, what pressures do you feel now that didn't exist before? Like, what do you see has changed a lot when it comes to raising kids when you're raising us compared to nowadays?
Yeah, I would say things have changed rapidly over the last, of the course of 20 years.
It's
When
crazy.
we first had you guys, it's technology available. I think it's funny thing. It's kind of crazy how fast technology has changed, because when you guys were born, it was right at the time of mobile phones were becoming really
Hmm.
affordable for the masses. Now they were available. Mobile phones, we used to call them car phones back in the day, but right around the early 2000s and late 1990s, cell phones becoming more of a commodity, and people, everyday people can afford them. And so we didn't have the crazy technology that you guys have, to like with social media. It was just mainly cell phones and TV, traditional TV or cable TV. And so we didn't have the same kind of pressures that many of you kids are being raised up, like our grandkids and your kids are being raised in this environment now, where the technology is so pervasive. There's just so much of it around, with smartphones, smart tablets, everybody's got the iPhones, the internet, social media, all these different things that are out there that our kids are being exposed to. And so our biggest pressures that we had with you guys was a little later on, when phones became smartphones. And so we decided early on that you guys were not going to have a smartphone in elementary school.
Yeah.
And even in middle school, we were kind of like, didn't really want you guys to have smartphones. You probably remember that, because all of you guys were complaining about these little flip phones that y'all had. And it's like, man, we don't want this stuff. And I was like, no, the phone is not for you to be entertained with. This phone for us to communicate with you guys.
Yeah.
So I would say that was probably the first phase of pressure,
Hmm.
not trying to keep up with everybody, what other kids were doing, but just being able to limit you guys, because we knew that smartphones would just be another distraction. At that stage of the game, you guys wanted getting more and more interested in video games, right? All the
Yeah.
gaming consoles and all that. So I was already
Facts.
concerned with that too, because I was like, the first generation of gaming consoles were just, they were just autonomous themselves. They were not
Hmm.
tied to the internet. And
Hmm.
then as you guys are getting a little older, you're tying your consoles to the internet, and then you're now exposed to all this other crazy stuff that's out there, the crazy language, how people are speaking. So that was one of the concerns too, is like, okay, how can we limit that so that you guys are not exposed to all that other crazy stuff? And then finally, just being the challenges of other kids not growing up in a Christian household, and you guys are being experienced or being exposed to how they were living, whether that was pornography or just the cussing or just the craziness of just some of these kids and what they're being exposed to. And they, of course, wanted to share that with their friends. And so, dealing with that, trying to mitigate that and find ways to kind of help you guys navigate through that as you were experiencing it. So I would say those were kind of the pressures that we're facing back in when you guys were a little bit younger.
Sounds like nothing has changed, to be honest. Seems like I'm thinking about the same things that you're speaking on. So that's interesting that it seems like as time has moved forward, the same pressures and the same kind of I don't know what's the word. I guess maybe things that you're trying to uh what's the word? I guess I guess avoid or try to
Filter or
filter. Yeah, I guess
yeah.
like filter and try to keep your child's ears and eyes away from are kind of the same things that I think about. So that's pretty interesting to think about. And I think all of the, like I said, I think all those are the same things that I'm trying to wrap my head around and how I should navigate when it comes to like phones. Because the biggest thing is that Soraya, she just turned 4, so she's going to start school in the next year or so, or this fall. So it's like, all right, so now I got to fill the room, how I'm going to navigate with her meeting new people, like you said, that may not be in the Christian faith, or her being exposed to different things in school that we won't have an eye on and things like that. So it's kind of scary to think about those things. But the cool thing is that like it seems like it hasn't changed. So maybe, exposure to like the internet and things like that is a little bit different, but same type of conformalities and, situations are kind of the same. So that's pretty interesting. So, and I was going to be the next question I was going to ask is like how different us growing up differs from like I guess my kids or even like when you were growing up. But it seems like it'd probably be the same thing. Like your parents were probably like trying to filter and navigate you to stop being, being conformed to like the patterns of the world and, just trying to give you like an upbringing in the Christian type of lifestyle. So do you think that's the same thing, like the way you're being raised and how that the ways you're teaching us, do you think that's like a kind of similar, I guess, when it comes to the upbringing?
Yeah, I would say that the pressure has definitely increased in terms of exposure to bad things. There were bad things when I was coming up. I mean, it was but it was harder to get to. Like for example,
Yeah.
pornography. For example, for one, you had to really, really go out of your way to gain access to pornography. And even back then, and this is where you have to be careful who you hang out with, because we had one of our neighbors' kids. We hung out with them and went over to their cousin's house, and then their cousin's house had these old movies. They were pornographic movies, and we were watching that. And this is way back in the day, right? So, but it was harder in those days to be exposed to those things because you had to kind of go out of your way, or if you wanted to go, you had to go like the stores had. They had, those kind of racy magazines, but they were covered and so forth, and you had to kind of physically go in there and get it, and so it was just harder. And I think nowadays, with the internet, everything is so easily to find and be exposed to. Not necessarily intentional, right? You may just be clicking on, and you're
Hmm.
looking up of toys on the internet, and next thing you know, this crazy stuff pops up, right? So it's just
Facts.
the environment now is it's easier to access these things that are not necessarily good for children. And so uh, you know in my day, I think it was a little bit easier to not be exposed to those things. And like I went to a private school, and it was a Christian school. Our peer pressure was smoking, and even not even that, because I think the funny thing about it is that there were very few people that even smoked
Hmm.
back then, but but never had any peer pressure to do any crazy things. It was just those kind of things like skipping school or Somebody may have not even bringing alcohol. I didn't was never exposed to that. So I think the pressure and the exposure is easier these days because of technology. But when I was growing up, like I said, that didn't have that kind of technology wasn't available. So it's harder to get access to those things that we shouldn't be accessing in the first place.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think the biggest thing, like you said, is that technology, especially my kids, like we have a tablet, we have like a iPad and things like that. We let them look at YouTube Kids and Miss Rachel and things like that. It's definitely educational stuff out there, but you always have to keep a close eye on what they're watching. Cause I've seen like in the news, even on like YouTube Kids, where people would just post things that's like for kids, but it's definitely adult themed. And like I've seen this one where I guess this channel was teaching kids how to like commit suicide and stuff. Like it's very weird. It's like, what the heck is going on? And the kids are very, I guess like they listen to anything and they'll like put everything inside them. So like
Yeah, they're
something small like
sponges.
that. Yeah, the sponges, like they'll just, take care of whatever they're feeding them. Oh, think it's something so innocent because they play, they portray it as such in such a way that's like, okay, this is playing around, like this is what everybody does, and then they do it, and then it's like, yo, what? Like, why did they do it? But they don't know any better just because of what the content is in front of them. So that's one thing that I like fear when it comes to like the technology because obviously there's always some bad apples that just wants to just ruin everything for everybody and have this type of evil type of spirit with them where they just prey on kids and things like that. So that's the scary part. And especially when it comes to like deep fake and what they can do with type of with pictures and other
Yeah.
things out there, it's kind of scary. So that's those are all of my fears when it comes to like technology. But like I said, it's always some bad apples. Like technology is not a bad thing. It's just those sort of people, group of people that wants to ruin it for everybody because of their evil intentions and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, you just have to
But
be you gotta be very, intentional about
mhm.
guarding, what your kids are being exposed to, and then also being open in the sense of sharing and teaching them, about these things. I mean, unfortunately, things have accelerated so much, and so now kids are being exposed to things much earlier in their lives, and so you have to kind of continue to teach them, godliness and teach them Christian ways, and how to navigate that and keep your doors open so they can come and openly and share these things. And that's where becomes a little bit harder. But anyway, I don't want to go too far fast forward. I think that's one of the things we're going to talk about shortly.
Yeah, and I just want to go into like kind of transition to our next segment and start off with like a verse, Deuteronomy 6 through 7. It's teaching faith in everyday moments. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts, and press them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. So, with that being said, I think the biggest thing when it comes to our faith and having children is to teach them and guide them along the way of life. Um, when you were raising us, how did you teach us faith and following God's footsteps and what He has for our life purpose and things like that without forcing it? Because I know it's harder to teach without forcing, and especially when it comes to Christianity, it's more a relationship. So you had to teach them how to have a relationship with God instead of just the everyday cycle of going to church and this is what our family does. So you have to conform to these rules type of thing. So how did you navigate teaching us about faith and your ways of teaching us about God and in the family type of atmosphere?
Yeah, man, I would say there's one scripture that I want to share
Okay.
that has helped and still helping me to fully understand. I think if parents, if we fully understand what the scripture is saying, then you kind of really appreciate why we need to be steadfast on teaching our kids the ways of the Lord. This is out of Psalms 127:3. I'll just read it right here. It says, "Children are a heritage from the Lord, offspring a reward from him. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior are children born in one's youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them." And so it's fascinating when you think about that scripture that every child that's born is a gift from God. and it's a heritage from God in the sense that your offspring should reflect back to you
Hmm.
what you poured into them.
Hmm.
That makes sense. And so if you pour into them things of the Lord, then that they will reflect things of the Lord back to you. And that's where the blessing comes in from. And I'm not saying that we're all perfect because we are not. And there, uh, definitely when you're raising kids, there are times when you don't do a great job and you fall short for whatever reason, whether it's because you just didn't know or just was not aware of those things. I know in my particular case, my parents were probably the first generation of parents that had a desire, like my mom had a desire to take us to church, but she didn't really fully understand what that meant to raise kids. She did the best that she could, and she did an outstanding job. And the great thing about it is that she did take us to church, was his foundation. But I think she never had the skill set or the tools to really teach us how to navigate in the world because she never had those tools and she was not aware of those tools.
Hmm.
Even when we started having kids ourselves, we didn't have everything in place. Fortunately, we both got saved before we had kids. And so we had the foundation of the gospel. But still, even having the foundation of the gospel, you still got to work out your salvation in a lot of ways, especially when you're raising with kids, because even though there are books out there, every child is different. Situations are different, environments are different. So you just have to, man, really trust God and knowing what to do, when to do it, and how to do it when those situations come up. So with you guys, it was each of you guys were different.
Yeah.
You raising Jordan, the middle child, and raising Amber were all different approaches. We could not use the same approach in teaching you guys. And so our goal was to, at bare minimum, is to get you exposed to being in a church environment so that
Hmm.
you can learn in that environment about meeting other people and hearing the word and, being exposed to community at an early
Hmm.
age. So that was the first phase. Second phase was making sure that we expose you guys to God at the home front. You know, we hope that our lives at church and outside were the same lives that we lived at the home. That was the goal, not to be hypocritical. Like beat you up with the Bible out in
Hmm.
public, but in private, I'm just a hellraiser. And
Hmm.
so that was one of the goals, to be sincere and be true in how we teach you guys by the way we lived. And so that
Hmm.
was one of the other things we wanted to make sure that we wanted to make sure that, yes, we wanted to teach you about the Bible, teach you about Jesus, but we wanted to live that same way too, because if teaching is one thing, but living is another thing. But if you can do both of them, then that creates an environment where you guys, we hope that you guys would want to be more interested in finding out more about Christ on your own. So that was one of the things we did. We didn't want to force anything on anyone, but we did make you go to church.
Yeah.
That was one rule. It's like, nah, I don't want to stay in bed. Nope, you going to church. So that's kind of our approach. We wanted to, and also explain things like when things were happening. Something happened in school. We wanted to not necessarily shy away from that incident, but to kind of use that as a teaching moment. Some of incidents were taught better than others, but the goal was that when you did experience life situations, that it will be a teachable moment. How can we tie God back into that situation, right? What do we do? Do we pray? How do we pray? Is there a particular scripture that we can go to? How do we respond to those things that are happening in a real time situation? So that was kind of our goals, to make sure that our Christian life was being lived true every situation. And hopefully hopefully that was the case when we were teaching you guys that.
Definitely. And I definitely applaud you guys because you definitely set a foundation that I want to transition to my family and kids. Just like you said, just that you going to church, that and but just having like a home front where it's like foundation is God and everything is built and structured around that. So I definitely applaud you guys because you definitely set a perfect example when it comes to having a God fearing relationship and family household. So yeah, definitely, I definitely take all those lessons and that type of upbringing into my new life, or not new life, but my family and my just the characteristics of our family. So I definitely appreciate that because he gave me a good example of how to raise my family and how to navigate this life in a sense. But I
Good
guess
answer. Because I was like, man, you could have come back and said, man, my parents were crazy.
yeah,
And,
it's like what's this
that,
guy talking about?
I don't know if I really want to answer that.
Yeah, I got you, I got you.
Man,
But in that case, like, do you think for I guess people that are listening now and that really didn't grow up in that type of household, um, how do you go about like what would you tell them to set a new example, especially when they didn't come up in that type of lifestyle? Like, do you think faith is more taught or caught just based on their type of upbringing? And how would you speak to those people that didn't grow up in that type of family household?
well, yeah, I mean, it's nothing. You can't do anything about the bad past, but change it, right?
Hmm.
So, this word that says today is the first day of the rest of your life. So you can use those experiences, whether they're good or bad in the past, or none, or no, none at all.
Hmm.
But you can use that as a foundation to springboard into say, hey, okay, Lord, yeah, I didn't have that life, or I didn't have a father figure or a mother figure, or came out of a dysfunctional family. But you can ask God to kind of help you recognize it and heal from it, then ask him to impart in you the strength and the wisdom and discernment and the desire to want to not cat pass that trait on to your next generation. So you have to kind of those generational curses, as they call them. God can break that cycle. For example, my family on my dad's side, it was a generational type thing where drinking and alcoholism was very prevalent. And, they from generation to generation. By the time, even when I started out, I used to drink a lot early on. But I got to a point where when I got saved, I was like, I didn't want that cycle to go on to the next generation. So I asked the Lord to kind of help me to break that desire where I have no desire to want to drink or get crazy with it. So I think if you just get into the state of being humble and asking God to kind of help you in that situation, then he can help break those bondage things down that are kind of pulling you back from being all that you be with raising your kids so that that's not passed on to them.
Hmm.
And sometimes it may take, getting some outside counseling if you can, just to kind of help mend and heal. Because if you don't get it taken care of, then that's an area that can actually project onto your offspring. And you definitely don't want that, especially if it's a negative thing. So yeah, I just ask, that's one thing great about salvation. That's one thing great about when God gets in your life, that all those things that in the past that you've dealt with be broken down, torn out, and thrown out, right? And then you renews your life, right? And so that you can
Hmm.
start afresh as a new person and being able to walk effectively and having a family and walking as a person of faith. Not saying that you're going to be perfect because we none of us are perfect. We all still make mistakes, but the knowing when you do make a mistake to be honest about it, right? Even with the kids. I know when I grew up, my parents never made mistakes, even though they did. As I got older, when I did something to you guys and I felt like I was convicted, like, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Go back and say, hey, I made a mistake there. I apologize for saying that or acting that out. And I don't, and I want to do that even more, right? Because like I said, we as parents, it's a, it's a journey. It's a journey as you raise kids, and now in our stage of our life, where you guys are grown, but even still, there's still you guys come to us for advice, and so just being careful and being prayerful to make sure that whatever we advice that we give you guys that it's based on the foundation of God's word and not just based on our own opinions and our feelings about certain things. So it's still ongoing, right? So, but yeah, for those who may not have had that, the key thing is trusting in God and allowing Him to kind of work on you to change your mindset, change your heart set, so that you can be a little bit more effective and not being in bondage to the things of the past, so that you can be free to grow and raise your kids properly. That was
Good
long-winded.
information.
Dang, that
Good
was really
information, though.
long-winded.
It's all good. I learned something new. But you brought up two good points that I kind of want to end this off with, like two kind of thought provoking questions, and definitely want to just get your understanding on these things. And one is like, what lessons did you learn the hard way as a parent? And then also, like, how do you feel about discipline? Because I know, definitely the Bible talks about discipline. I think like Hebrews 12:11, discipline produces righteousness. So that is one verse, and I'm pretty sure there's many verses that talks about discipline and how to correct or uh, just fits your child, or like how to help your child grow. I guess in a sense when it comes to uh, lessons and growing up. But how do you feel about that, especially nowadays where I feel like discipline is kind of an issue because it's kind of on like a thin line when it comes to abuse and discipline, when it comes, especially when it comes to outside of Christianity. They definitely don't want to see the spankings and things like that. But how do you feel about discipline? What is the best way to discipline? And like I said, what lessons did you learn the hard way as a parent?
Yeah. So discipline was definitely, I had to learn and grow with that because the only way I knew of discipline is the way it was applied to me growing up. Now my parents now my parents' generation was probably great. Their parents came from the old school.
I remember Grandpa had that bamboo, but I was
Yeah.
good. I never got hit by it. I don't think so. I just remember that.
Yeah, so it's fascinating. So, and I know this could be probably another topic, but I'll just say it real quickly. So, my mom's parents and grandparents came out of a time where physical discipline, like spanking and belts and stuff, was very strong in the African American community. And I always wondered why, but a lot of it had to do with the life and death because the environments that they grew up in was a very, it was a Jim Crow environment. And so you could not be loosey goosey about your interactions with people, especially white people. And so they had to come down really hard on their kids to make sure that they walked with discipline in dealing with outside the home. And so the discipline was very physical and sometimes harsh because it was a life or death situation. That was passed on to my parents. And although my parents were not, my parents were never abusive at all.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
let's get that out. Right out. But they did use the rod, they used the switch, they used the belt, they used all those things to kind of discipline us.
Hmm.
And, at the time when I was going through it, some of it was well deserved.
Yeah, I
Talk to my
understand.
mom about that. Well, actually, most of it was well deserved, but I didn't really fully understand it because you're like, hey, why my parents beating me?
Yeah.
And so with you guys, I was learning the process that discipline when the child's really young and they don't fully understand, and yeah, you have to discipline is important in all the stages of kids' development. When they're small, when they're teenagers, young adults, and so forth. But the way of disciplining changes, right? And so when you're really young, you have to kind of get the child's attention. So you'll tap them, pop them like that, just to kind of get their attention. But as you get older, you wanted to, I know my wife and I wanted to explain more why we were doing things. Like if you did something wrong, we wanted to explain to you why we're doing these things to you guys, and try not to do it out of anger. I remember one time I was trying to discipline Amber. Amber did something, can't remember exactly what she did. And all I had to do was threaten her about the belt, and she would just go crazy. So I remember one time she did something. I can't remember exactly what it is. So I said, "Well, I'm gonna get the belt," and she's like, "No, no, don't get the belt, don't get it." So I'll try to look stern on my face, like I'm gonna discipline you, and then she was just doing that. So I had to turn my head and laugh, and then turn back to look serious to her. But a lot of times, you don't even have to even, touch her. I didn't even never touched her. I just threatened her and she straightened
Hmm.
up. And so, like I said, yeah, you got to make sure that when you discipline your kids, not to discipline them in anger,
Hmm.
because that's where it becomes dangerous. Yeah, you might be angry, but you don't want to discipline when you're
Hmm.
angry because that can escalate into being, violent. And I think it's a challenge for, like I said, in the African American community, especially the older generation, was that could be considered abuse. But at the same time, you have to discipline your children because you can't let them decide on their own because they don't know anything, right? They think they know something, but you have to find ways to discipline them. And you just have to ask God for wisdom on what's the best way to do that. Uh, some of them may require when they're younger, a little spanking. Some of them require, a timeout, removing things that they like to do. But whatever that may be, you have to have discipline in your child's life because if you don't do discipline them when they're younger, when they get older, um, without that discipline, they can end up doing worse things, even up to the point of even dying because of not being properly disciplined. So anyway, that's my take on it. It's a hard one. It's ever evolving, but I mean, the key thing is you got to ask for wisdom and to talk to other people that that have some expertise in that space, but also people that are Christians too that have small kids and ask them, say, hey, how do you guys discipline your kids? And then you kind of decipher from that which is the best way. And like I said, each child is different. Um, you know, Spanking may be work for one and may not work for the other.
Mhm.
Timeout may work for one and may not work for the other. In your case, I think one time you did something and I think I popped you and you were like, you still found. And then I said, well, go clean your room. And then you started crying there. So you just never know. You just never know what that is unless you take the time to find out. But I think discipline is a critical piece in raising your kids.
Okay. And just a follow-on question, we don't have to go on a tangent on this,
Uh,
but do you think nowadays with kids, quote unquote, are worse? I feel like because I think every generation there's a sense of the kids are getting bad over generations. Do you think that's because of that type of discipline and spankings, things like that, where now the adults now want to stay away from it, but they're still not disciplining them because of those past traumas?
Yeah.
But do you think that could be a reason why I guess future generations are getting less disciplined so that the kids are becoming more of a nuisance growing up?
Like I said, I'm not an expert in this.
Yeah,
So
yeah, definitely. This is like quick
yeah,
yes or no, or but
I would say that kids are definitely smarter these days, may not necessarily be wiser, but they are more aware or exposed to knowledge. And so I wouldn't say that they've gotten worse. I just think they've just been exposed to more. And so when you're exposed to more, then it can be applied in a good way and it can be applied in a bad way. And so we as parents just have to be more proactive in being engaged in our kids' lives. Like I mentioned before, technology is just all around us. And I know sometimes as parents, you're tired and you just want your kids to kind of go off in the room and
yeah,
be to themselves and they use technology to do that. Or sometimes as a younger child, you'll give them a tablet to keep them occupied. But I think we all have to just sometimes set aside the technology and just spend quality time together.
that's a good point.
And I think the key thing, and that will help with teaching our kids to be great adults and God-fearing adults. That family time, that bond time, and listening to each other. Because right now, man, it's just like everybody wants to spend time on the texting and playing video games, and now with AI, that's becoming more entrenched in our life. Now people are communicating to that like they're friends, right? And
Hmm.
spending more time with technology as opposed to spending time as a family. And so, just parents, we just have to be more proactive and getting our kids outside. Say, hey, just put the tablets down, put the computers down. Let's go outside. Let's go for a walk. Let's go hiking. Let's go camping. Let's go fishing. Let's go travel and see the world or whatever whatever your budget may allow. But it's the simple thing is just go outside and walk down the street, right? Just to kind of make sure that our kids are staying attached to us. And then also that it gives us an opportunity to be able to teach, to share, and that they feel comfortable in sharing with some of the things that they're experiencing, right? I think that's another issue too. Sometimes kids feel like they don't feel like our parents are disconnected. They live in a different
Yeah,
world, and that may not be able to relate to what I'm experiencing. And so I will use technology or my friends as a way to, to expose and share those things. And unfortunately that those things may not be sufficient to be able to meet the needs of the child or the person. And so anyway,
Yeah.
that's my 2 cents on it.
Nah, I think you nailed it right on the head with that statement, because I think that's a if you didn't listen to anything on this podcast, I think that's the gimme right there is make sure you're giving your kids undivided attention, because if you're not giving it to them, somebody else will.
For sure.
So that's the that's the answer right there. If you're not giving it to them, they're gonna seek it somewhere else, and that other option may not be the best option. And that's why we see a lot of kids kind of trying to find that love somewhere else, and that's where they get them in the most trouble, because they're just seeking that validation, they're seeking that love, they're seeking whatever that's lacking in their life at home. So that's a great ending statement right there. Just make sure that you're spending quality time with your children. Listen to your children, because at the end of the day, they're probably coming to you and telling you all the stuff that's going on around with them, what's things going on in their lives. And if you're not listening to them, they're just going to suffer in silence. So, and I think that's another thing too, is just like that technology, it really has our attention in a whim, because even as adults, like we just on the TikTok doom scrolling, Instagram doom scrolling all day, and then not spending that value of time with the children. Like even when it's like a dinner, everybody's on their phones, or watching TV, or nobody, yeah, just like nobody's going outside and playing, spending quality time with each other without technology. If you did, like I said, if you didn't learn anything, just make sure that you spend those valuable moments with your kids, because that could be the making or breaking of your child. So yeah, I appreciate that, because I didn't even think about that. So that was a great point. But I think that's everything. I think we're wrapping up. I appreciate you guys coming and listening to our episode. I hope you guys learned something new. If you're going through just raising your family, I hope you took a few lessons learned here, especially from my Todd's life and raising us. As you can see, like he did a pretty good job so far,
Yeah, it,
but
it ain't over yet.
it ain't over with yet. But nah, I'm just joking. But as a father and son, and having this podcast, I think he did a good job raising us
Appreciate that. You're a
in a
fine
great
young man
household.
too.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed this podcast, let us know in the comments below if you have any type of 2 cents, or if you want to add anything that you thought was intriguing to this episode. Just make sure you give a comment, make sure you like and share it to any family member that may be going through the same situation, or maybe about to start a family. So again, I appreciate you guys' time, and we'll catch you on the next one.
See you guys. God bless. Take care.
See you later. Have a good one.